Hi, I'm Jonathan McDonald from Potency.World and Business Live Global. And for the next 6 months, we're going to be covering the issue of dyslexia. I have been lucky to meet someone in the gym who has a similar experience to talk about, and one of my best friends also have similar experiences. Indeed, we find it funny. So we're going to cover a number of issues. First one for you guys is, understanding dyslexia. So let me hand over to the inspiration for this show, Reggie.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So the name of this podcast we've decided on, after various number of email exchanges, is going to be Dyslexia Decoded. Mm-hmm. We think that this is probably, all our minds basically gravitated to this sort of like name. So this is the name that we're going to use for the name of the podcast. And today we are going to be talking about understanding dyslexia. We've also got Sinead, which is Jonathan's friend, who's also going to be coming onto the podcast and sharing her experience. So Sinead?
Hiya, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So let's dive in then. Understanding dyslexia. Now, Sinead and I, did we discover together? Basically, I was reading that book. And then I said things, didn't I? Go on.
Yeah, I think you just kind of know. I think before we started the podcast earlier, we were talking about a story you mentioned that we were potentially talking about. And I think surrounding a celebrity. And I think sometimes you just look at people, or you see the way that they write you a text, or certain things that they do in their communication style, that you can just like pick up on these like little subtle hints that I think, unless they're like clearly obvious to someone who's not neurodivergent, they possibly wouldn't pick up on. Or really, I think it is actually maybe dyslexia specific. Maybe it's not something even other neurodivergents would pick up on. Especially when it's things like spelling errors. I think that's something that gets picked up on as one of the easiest things. And for me, when I see a spelling error, I instantly think dyslexic, rather than someone who might not be, who might just think, what an idiot, they can't spell.
I get that, because I was in the gym today, and someone else was chatting to me. In the what's it called? Not the sauna. Yeah, in the sauna. So I'm talking to this bloke for, I don't know, about a minute or two, and he just starts saying, as you were saying, Sinead, he just said a couple of things, and I went, "Oh, are you dyslexic?" He goes, "Yeah," and he was the same age as me, and I'm too old to have been diagnosed, so we were all just called stupid. But basically, it's, for me, I don't see, because it doesn't exist, but I see the energy profile of dyslexics, dyscalculics, and also some people on the ADHD scale. But I would say that you're right, Sinead, people with autism and other things like that have a very different and difficult challenges to get through.
Yeah, completely agree with that. I think, I kind of would like to imagine that we gravitate towards each other, maybe.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, picking up on what you said, one of my other really good friends has ADHD. I think definitely it is something that seems to be consistent within my sort of friendship groups.
Who else do you know, Reggie, or who have you known apart from me?
Yeah, my daughter, definitely my dad.
Yeah,
even I didn't know it at the time, but it's only sort of like processing things now and going back and thinking, yeah, my dad definitely had dyslexia, and maybe some other neurodivergent features as well. My daughter, obviously you. And it's funny what Sinead said about recognise it in others. There's a couple of guys at work that we were doing a whiteboard session, and he would have done the same things that I did in terms of, the way he drew things, the spelling mistakes or the spelling errors. And I thought, this guy is probably dyslexic as well. So
did you ask him?
No, I didn't, and we'll get onto this sort of like later. We've got plenty of time to talk about that. But it's like you can guess or a calculated guess on other people's whether they are dyslexic or not. But spoken. I mean, I think you always talk to a lot of people anyway in the gym. But
me, no.
We got into the subject and we were quite open about being dyslexic, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, you see, this is, for me, that's the interesting point, because they label dyslexia as a special educational need, and yet time and time again, you find someone doing something so precisely, so beautiful in their craft, that you just go, holy shit. And what I'll come on to is I'm going to quote a bit out of a book called The Gift of Dyslexia in a moment, but I put a yellow film on my headlights on my car, so my lights are yellow. Now then, those car wrapping companies where they wrap it? So it was one of those, and I've known him for like 10 years now, and one of the guys that works for him in this thing was putting on this yellow film to my lights, and I was standing there chatting to him, and first thing he did was wipe the light down, both that, open the bonnet, all look around the bonnet, bumper, underneath the bumper, really, really detailed. I watched him put the stuff on, and I went, are you dyslexic, mate? And he stopped, and a tear came to his eye. He goes, fucking hell, man, you're the first person who understood. I go, yeah, because your work is amazing. Yeah. But anyway, that's one anecdote of many I could throw in.
I'll tell you what I want to do then is actually describe, each of us describe our dyslexic profile, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So go on, Sinead. How does if someone said to you is dyslexic, well, you say you're dyslexic. What are your traits? Because I know the traits are different for everybody.
Yeah, I think. I think it's a tricky one. I'm not too sure, because I haven't, if I'm totally honest, done sort of a hell of a lot of research on dyslexia. So I'm not sure what the standard traits are other than the basics, because and one of the reasons why it puts me off is because anytime I do research it, it's labelled as a special need, and it's kind of pitched as being something that's a disadvantage, and I have never seen it as a disadvantage.
No.
To myself, I definitely see it as a superpower, and I think the main thing for me that has really been the only thing that I would say is something I struggled with when I was a child, and something that is still an issue for me now, not as much, but is just the spelling side of things, and that's kind of the most obvious thing when it comes to me, which is my issue specifically is to do with vowels. So obviously when we're in school we learn everything phonetically. We're taught phonetically, and I believe that's still the case today. To me, when you say something and you say it, all vowels pretty much sound the same. So it's like, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, and I can't think of one. But if you think of a word, for me, the vowel in that word could literally be anything. So I think today, with obviously everything kind of being done online, and like there's so much sort of autocorrect available, I kind of do get away with it in most circumstances, and I think I have put a lot of work in myself in trying to correct things, and I do that by using visual learning techniques that I apply to words, rather than trying to learn things by like auditory, like via sound, because it just doesn't work for me, and it never did, and I think that's where I really struggled. But I think now when I do point out to people that I'm dyslexic, especially in the workplace, and I don't really make it known, I have to say, I generally have kind of said something to someone when I'm like leaving a company. I'll just throw it out there just to get a response, and it's always been like, oh, I never would have guessed. And I feel really proud of that, because I feel like I've put a lot of work into learning, not to mask it, but just to strengthen that weakness that I feel is part of my dyslexia. But other than that, I feel like, it's definitely a superpower. My creative thinking, my ability to see all different perspectives on situations, my problem solving skills are like excellent. And I definitely think there are so many more things that are part of my dyslexia that make me that make it a superpower, and the way my brain works as an advantage rather than a disadvantage.
Makes sense. Reggie, you go next.
What I was going to do is just jump on the back of what Sinead said about is it spelling? Did you say? Yeah, spelling and spelling errors. I mean, for me, that's probably one of the biggest things, but also pronouncing words. For me, I really struggle with that, especially medical terms, or medical pills.
Yeah.
Because my mum takes loads and loads of pills. Can I pronounce any of those? I just can't. I mean, Sinead, I'm just thinking, is that something as well for you?
Absolutely, yeah. I was just going to say, I actually, don't even think about these things, but and I don't know if you have this too, but it's funny. When someone does correct me, it's like my brain has already learnt that word, and I find it very difficult to then change it. So recently, one was that my medication that I take for my migraines is called somatropin, and I've always called it somatropin. And my friend started telling me the other day that her mum takes somatriptan, and I was like, "Oh, what's that for migraines?" And then I connected the two, that it was the same thing. And even though she's corrected me and said somatropin, and I think she was doing it as an underhand way to correct me, because she knew when I was talking about somatropin, I was talking about somatriptan. But I can't say somatriptan. Every time someone asks me what my migraine medication, I will always say somatropin, because that's just the way I learned it. So it's very difficult to remember to sort of change it once you learn.
So spelling, for me, pronunciation, and for then on top of that, reading. So it must be the same for you as well, Sinead.
Reading is something, again, another skill that I learned was pretty much to speed read. And I think once you learn that as a dyslexic, then you don't struggle as much anymore. But I would say with that, it's a skill that you learn and you have to keep up. Yep. So I feel like if I go for a long period of time without reading a book, then I do notice it takes me a little bit longer to sort of get back into it. But I think as a dyslexic, if you learn to speed read, and it's not as hard as some people might think, then you should hopefully, that should be another skill in your bag that you can, so it's something that basically you can turn into a skill quite easily.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out, I think I've read this to you before, Sinead, but basically, so I only found out that I was dyslexic because I had been trying to teach dyslexic children who were labelled as problems, like problems for the teaching. It was behavioural difficulties. And I watched them for day or two, and I went, you don't have behavioural problems, you can't interact with the world, because when you find reading and speaking and everything so difficult, it means you can only live in the sort of physical space. And I think that's why children become disengaged, because the phonics, so I had this conversation today, we teach English using phonics, but you can't spell the word phonics phonetically. It's madness.
Example. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to read a bit from this book called The Gift of Dyslexia, which we'll see how much it resonates with each review. So, The mental function that causes dyslexia is a gift in the truest sense of the word, a natural ability, a talent. It is something special that enhances the individual. Dyslexics don't all develop the same gifts, but they do have certain mental functions in common. Here are the basic abilities all dyslexics share. They can utilize the brain's ability to alter and create perception, the primary ability. They're highly aware of the environment. They're more curious than average. They think mainly in pictures instead of words. They're highly intuitive and insightful. They think and perceive multidimensionally using all the senses. They can experience thought as reality, and they have vivid imaginations. Now, I know that I read that and I went, yeah, I've been doing that for years. What about you guys?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely the sensing thing, having kind of like almost like a sixth sense, being able to almost feel other people's energy. That's something that I have. And actually that is kind of one thing that sometimes I do feel like can be a little bit of a disadvantage, because especially if you're in a workplace and you're sitting next to someone where you don't have a choice but to sit next to someone, and you know, they might have kind of a negative energy. And it might just be for a day, or it might just be something they always kind of have around them. But that is something, kind of taking on that energy is something that I really struggle with. And I really pick up on these kind of, micro, I don't know.
Attacks.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas other people, it kind of goes over their head. And even when I've said it to people in the past, said like, oh, there's this weird like tension in the room or something, they'll be like, what are you talking about? But it's things like that I can definitely feel.
So you're using, when it says using all the senses, you're having a physical feeling as you watch the room.
I feel tension from people. I feel like, you know, if they're upset about something, and often I'll kind of, you know, pick up and ask someone if they're okay before they're kind of even done processing what they're upset about. So I kind of, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely my partner, like I will say like that there's something wrong when they kind of don't know that there's something wrong yet. So it's almost like being able to pick up on these things before they happen.
So I find that very interesting, because I was saying to this bloke in the gym, the same bloke that said in the gym, I said, we were talking about, well, the phrase he came out with at the end was Sherlock Holmes quote. But basically I said to him, what was I saying? I can't remember the name. Oh, that was the same guy about Keanu Reeves, actually. Oh, then he said, I said to him, I said, yes, people like, because we've had some deep conversations. I said to him, oh yeah, people like us, we can pick up on a lot more stuff. Now, he isn't diagnosed as dyslexic, but he has. So there was a book I read called The Myth of Dyslexia, and it's a big book by this guy called Gabor Maté, and he basically explains that any sort of childhood trauma, and trauma doesn't have to be, you know, beaten up or raped or something like that, but just maybe a bit of neglect. Those situations, the way we make coping mechanisms when we have that experience, means that we begin to disassociate. So I am watching my mind from the top right, and it's in like a bowl beneath me. I'm quite a long way, because sometimes I have 16 little balls in that bowl, and I can see them all happening at the same time. So basically, it's only because I had, Sinead obviously knows, Reggie probably knows, I had a bunch of strokes, and having to rebuild my consciousness, I was watching myself doing it. And to me, that was just like, yeah, okay, right, if I move this leg, it lights up here. Okay, that's how I get that. And a lot of metaphor, a lot of storytelling within my mind, which is quite weird, I'm told.
So do you think dyslexia then is not something you're born with? You think it stems from childhood trauma?
I haven't made that connection yet.
Okay.
But it's certainly true that, it's certainly true that we as dyslexics face, trauma is an overused word, but if it's so some books I'll read, and if they are broken up into paragraphs like normal good writing, I can do what you do, Sinead, speed read it, get through it. And then you pick up some books and it's tiny, and I wear glasses as it's still tiny, and it's just a block of text, no breaks at all in the page. That I find very difficult. Reg?
Yeah, no, when you were talking about trauma, I was just wanting to go back to one of the, not definitions, but one thing I've read is that they say it's hereditary. So obviously I know my dad has got it, and then I know I've got it, and my daughter's got it, and I know that my wife's sister's got it, and her daughter's got it. So when you say about trauma, I mean, sometimes that's, you know, they do say there's generational trauma, and that's passed on and passed on. So I'm not sure, Sinead, whether you were going to be whether we were going down that route in terms of...
I definitely would be inclined to agree with you. I feel it's hereditary. I would I would think that my dad probably has it as well, and I know it runs in my family. My sister has it, which I only found out recently. I'm pretty sure one of my brothers has it as well. So I definitely think it's something to do with hereditary. And I think sort of, I'm pretty sure I kind of did struggle with reading from quite an early age. So I definitely would think that mine is down to
That's interesting. Go on.
Genetics, that's it.
I mean, my journey is almost similar to yours, where all of us, I mean, when I was younger, I was taken out of the class because my reading was a lot, I was well behind other children. This was 5 or 6 years old. Right. And that sort of like carried me until when I was about, I think it was probably about 12. And there were sort of like 3 points in my life where the sort of dyslexia was highlighted and magnified to myself. And when I was 12 years old, I was very good I was in a lower set. They used to stream people then, so I was in a lower set. So and one of the teachers who was championing for me said, look, Reggie's maths is absolutely unbelievable, it's really good, but he's in a lower set. And I said, well, he's in a lower set because his English and reading and writing is not great. Anyway, to cut a long story short, this teacher who championed me to move up to the top set in maths said, look, we can get round the English and the spelling and stuff like that. And in the end, I was in the top class for maths. But they didn't. But in those days, they never. Now I think they would have said, "Okay, Reggie, you've probably got dyslexia. You need support." But it didn't happen then. So when I look back, I think, okay, that was the defining point in my life. Then I was told that my reading and writing and spelling was well below standard, but my maths was way above standard. And it's one thing about dyslexia: you're good at certain things, and you're not good at other things.
I think that's everyone though, really. I think like often people who are good at English generally, might struggle with math or might struggle with languages. I feel like everyone's got something that they struggle with, but I feel like in school it's just magnified. If your English isn't good, you kind of like just get relegated to being, stupid or like kind of everything else. I have to say, like I did, by the time I got to secondary school, I think already I had worked pretty hard on my English, and I knew that I had to make much more of an effort with that than I did with kind of anything else. So I just poured pretty much all my efforts into that. So I did in senior school did do pretty well, and I wasn't really in sort of lower sets for anything, and that sort of balanced everything else out.
So you didn't see? Yeah, that's because it was your dad. Like, so I'm 15 years older than Sinead, and you're a few years older than me, aren't you?
Yeah.
So as a young child, I'm adopted, but as a young child, my dad said to me, in a joking sort of dry humour way, he goes, "Oh, you got verbal diarrhea." Because I speak, and this is one of the things about dyslexia, there is so much more going on inside our head than there is happening outside in the world. The world is one perspective that we look and see and smell and all the rest of it. It's not what's out there that's a difference in me, it's what I do inside my head. Because inside my head, I rip things apart, I disassemble them, I reassemble them. 3D TVs and stuff like that, or how these 8K TVs, they've got this picture of fish looking on them, and they look fantastic, yeah? And there's no doubt that they're fantastic, but the point that I think a lot of people miss is the only way that you can appreciate the fact that 8K looks fantastic is because your eyes and brain can handle it. So a while ago, I did a post, or I did a search on Google, and obviously Google isn't nearly truth, but let's put that to one side. And what was I saying? I'm in the middle of a train of thought then. Oh, bucket. I always forget.
It's also, I think, a trait of dyslexia, funnily enough, is losing your train of thought.
Indeed, that's what it. Thank you. You just reminded me, actually. Yeah. No, I forgot.
So that happens to me all the time.
We'll add that to the list.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what. Now it's come back round again. So thank you very much. So the thing is that. So I had the strokes and I had to build my brain up again. So I watched myself doing it. So the way I now see is very constructed. I've taken all the stuff that was too fast, and after having the brain injury, I'm now slowed down enough that I'm only, maybe 300 or 400 times better than anyone else. But the difficulty is, you try to explain something to a non-dyslexic, and it's incredibly difficult for me to give a short answer. I've got one of these phones, you have to press the key 3 times to do a letter. Even on texts, I do uppercase properly and full stops, all that sort of shit. So I try to manage my communication, but what I find myself doing, and actually for Sinead, I was watching you about 4 years ago. Sinead and I met this bloke who was a film cameraman interested in films, and he was dyslexic, but he couldn't. Oh man! So basically, I have anywhere between 6 to 18 spheres of attention at any one point. I don't really turn them on or off. They reassign themselves if I'm doing a task, but they're there as availability. And I think the only reason I know about them is because I had the brain injury, whereas most people that have dyslexia don't actually realise what a superpower it is. Thoughts?
No, I agree. This is the reason why I wanted to do the podcast, because, just to hear other people's experience, because I just don't get a chance to talk about things like this, and what you're saying in terms of how your brain is wired and what you're thinking about, and it's going on on different tangents and thinking about so many different things at one time. That's what my brain is like all the time, and it's just such a great thing to hear, because no one else will get it apart from us.
No. I think, well, I don't know if you've experienced this, but a couple of things I was just thinking about is one is where you have, like, you're having a conversation with someone. Me and Johnny do it a lot, where we're having a conversation, we're talking about one thing, and then we switch to another subject, and then another subject, and then we switch back to the original subject, and we kind of like can talk at cross purposes. Whereas I feel like, someone who's non-dyslexic often struggles to keep up.
Yes.
When you're going at like a million miles an hour. And one of the things also that I've struggled with in the past with non-dyslexics is that they have called me out for interrupting them when they're speaking. I think it's also like that is also a cultural thing as well, especially among like British English people. Certainly, because in my Irish culture, it's not really a rude thing to interrupt someone when they're speaking. But definitely here, I've been called out in the workplace. I don't feel like it's rude, because it's like you just want to get your point across, and especially when you've got a dyslexic brain, you've got a million things going on in your head, and you're probably going to forget it if you don't say it out loud there and then. But yeah, that's something that's
I'll tell you what, I want to jump on that as well. Just two things. Yeah, I do the same and I think it's because I want to say it, because the thought will go from my head and I won't remember what I'm saying. But I think on this podcast we've been pretty good. We haven't really interrupted each other, so I don't know.
I'm like making a real effort. Like.
Oh, please feel free to interrupt.
and because I edit podcasts as well, so like I have a lot of experience with being annoyed with people talking over each other. Like, I can't stand that.
Also, so I was going to say about my daughter. When me and my daughter talk, we understand each other because we're going from one topic to another, and people outside were saying, "But hold on, you spoke about this one, but how do you know you're talking about this one?" And because we get it, but other people will say, "How come I thought you were talking about this, now you're talking about something else. Can you just stick to one subject?" And but me and my daughter just understand each other. But I think in our family now, I think people understand us now because we do it so often that they get it now. See what I mean? The non-dyslexics.
Yeah.
I think so. Certainly, Sinead and I have a similar experience. She was explaining when we meet up, and that is that the topic. So of my 19 spheres, one of them is one of the conversations, and they're having 18 others on their own. And so the thing I've noticed is that, and this is what you notice when you meet people, anyone that can hear me and understand anything I'm saying, it's a fucking miracle that they do. Because what we're doing is we're constructing a visual picture which necessarily flies off in all these different tangents, and to a dyslexic brain, it's okay, because I can have that bit over here and that bit over there and this bit over here and that bit down there and make up a picture. Maybe not exactly the picture, but the same picture as you're having. Whereas I think that's the thing. So basically, I refer to my family, who are all multi-degrees, letters after their name, this, that, blah, 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 blah. It's amazing. But the simple idea that someone has a belief other than the one they have is beyond them. For all their intelligence, they can't accept that other people have different views. So it's I think that when we talk about understanding dyslexia, I think, as Sinead pointed out, it's been branded as a learning need, a special learning need, and actually it isn't. The only reason dyslexic children struggle in school is because phonics is the way we teach them, and phonics doesn't work. And so when you're 5 or 6 and you're learning for year 2, when they examine you, that's the first SATs test in our culture at the moment, they've taught you a strategy, you get marked wrong because you've spelt phonetically, and then as a result of that, you get called stupid, whereas in actual fact, no, teacher, if you were using the right strategy, everyone would get along, which is spelling by visual. You create a picture in your mind, and that's why that is the kind of how can I explain it? It's the bundle of information that we sort of have so much in our minds going on. I've lost my train of thought again. Reggie, help us out.
No problem. Right. One thing I would say is, in terms of when you say teacher, my mum was a teacher for 30 years, so I wouldn't say it's the teacher, I would say it's the education system. I just want to be sort of like clear on that, because the teachers just do not get the support that they need, and their job is tough enough already without having to add, the additional needs of each individual in the class. So I just wanted to add to that.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
But I do find it astonishing that the education system hasn't adapted, and that there isn't that awareness in the education system yet for sort of how to manage dyslexics, because the fact is that the majority of the world's biggest CEOs are dyslexic. Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, I'm pretty sure Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk are dyslexics. Musk is we said it, type of Asperger's. Right, yeah, okay. Well, I knew he was neurodivergent or on the spectrum somewhere along the line, same as I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg is. I mean, he eats the same thing every day and wears the same thing every day. Normal people don't do that.
Well, it's funny because I do.
Yeah, I know, and I mean, I ate hummus every day for like about 3 years. So, I definitely think these are, traits of dyslexics. But I think, when you've got people like that sort of running the biggest organizations in the world, I think the education system really needs to catch up and start supporting dyslexics more, and just having a lot more understanding for how to help them through the education system so that it isn't so awful. I mean, for the most part, I think once you leave school it doesn't matter so much, but I think it's not healthy kind of going through the education system feeling like you're stupid or you're not as good as sort of everyone else, when really they're just kind of designed to be, I think the origins of the education system was built so that they would create the best factory workers, not CEOs. So so obviously the people that are kind of being praised in school, and it's an interesting point actually, I'm not sure who raised it to me. It was in a conversation I had in the last few months, and they said, with people coming out as factory workers, it must be really hard for them because they must go through their school system thinking that they're going to do really well for themselves, and then come out of school and they don't do maybe as well in life as they thought. And the opposite can be said for dyslexics and neurodivergence.
I think that it must be I don't think it must be. My perception is that the problem-solving abilities of trying to deal with the world when we're dyslexic. So we have these, because it's like uppercase B's or lowercase B's and Q's. I mix up. I always miss out little words like on or in a sentence because I don't. That isn't what the story is about. It's kind of a linking word and it means nothing to me. So I always ignore that. So, in terms of understanding dyslexia, we're kind of coming to the end of this episode. Would anyone like to... we've been talking about our own stories, so if we start with Reggie, then Sinead, then E, is there something you can say to a potentially dyslexic person listening to this as to which would help them, basically?
Basically, you're not on your own. There's plenty of other people with dyslexic. Let me start again. You're not on your own. There are plenty of other people out there that have got dyslexia, and I think just be open and talk about it, and try not to, use it as a. Think of it as a superpower. Think of it as a superpower, and just try and be able. I mean, if I hadn't spoken about it to Jonathan, to you, Jonathan, then we wouldn't be on this podcast. I wouldn't be able to go on this journey with you guys to discover how dyslexia affects my life, and hopefully doing this podcast will help others.
Excellent. And I think I would say as my last point that every time I observe something spectacular in the world, it turns out that person, when I look them up on Google, it always turns out that person has dyslexia. And so I, like Sinead, but it's visual for me. I can spot. No, it's not. It's auditory. Oh dear. so I can hear it in people, but I can't. Oh, that's a problem now. I'm undecided as to what it might be. But basically, I think that the speed of processing is so high in dyslexics that we're able to understand things that other people really struggle with who've gone through traditional learning. So I think I'll leave you with a tip from, or a fact from that book, The Gift of Dyslexia, and it is the fact that if you think about learning in every single education institute, from primary school to degree to PhD, it's all verbal reasoning. It's written sentence, and after you've written a sentence, you know something, then you go to the next something, you know something else, and it's like that, very linear. And so basically the whole of human evolution is quite linear, except for some bumps in it, and the bumps are the dyslexics. The bumps are always producing something other than the norm. So I call myself a dyslexic, and I charge a fortune. So that's what I would say. Okay, happy with that?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, come back next time and listen to this, blah, blah, blah. You can edit it. Okay. Right, everyone want a quick pee break?
Yep, sounds good.
Have a drink, sort yourself out.